Walk safe this winter with Kim Block, sponsored by MEMIC. Will begin streaming shortly. Walk safe this winter with Kim Block, sponsored by MEMIC. Will begin streaming shortly. Walk safe this winter with Kim Block is sponsored by MEMIC.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kim Block, and it's so nice to be here with you today for our live webinar on our Walk Safe program. We do invite you, I'll say right off the bat, to as you are tuning in, perhaps be thinking of some questions and comments that you have about falls, especially during the wintertime, falls you may have had or questions about how to prevent them. Some of the topics we'll be covering today. Some of you may know me after my more than 40 years actually here as an anchor at WGME. And I have worked very hard to get back here to this point of being able to do a live broadcast with all of you. It started about 6 years ago, almost exactly 6 years ago, when I suffered a brain injury. Many of you may have seen or heard about our Walk Safe program that the station and I and MEMIC, a workers' comp company very devoted to prevention of accidents, have been working on this winter. This is one of the events that I've been looking most forward to, so that I get to talk with you as well. So some of you who may not be as familiar with my story, I'd like to start with that. So please watch this. Some of you may know me from my nearly 40 years anchoring on CBS 13. You may remember that day in January of 2020 when I said goodbye in my last newscast. But the story starts a year earlier, in January 2019. When MEMIC approached me to share my story to help others, I decided to do it in the form of a letter to myself. Dear Kim, it will be a typical early January day when you will wake up to see light snow falling. And since there has been a bit of a warm-up, it will feel nice to see winter reappear. Right near your porch, just next to your driveway, the new snow covers a small patch of ice. This ice will change your life. The next step will cause your feet to slip up and forward in a rapid blur of motion, and you will land squarely on the back of your head. After lying motionless and dazed, you will somehow convince your legs to move and stand up. You will go inside and sit in a chair to clear the fog, and then trudge back to the yard, falling forward onto your hands several times, and you will go to work. Other than a headache and feeling tired, you believe you can do your job. In hindsight, this was not the best move. As you finish the 6 p.m. news, you will excuse yourself and go to the emergency department. The doctor will ask concussion-related questions, and you tell him about a minor one you had many years ago that cleared in less than a week. He assures you that is likely to be the case this time. In a week, you will feel worse, and thus will begin your journey with post-concussion syndrome, later diagnosed as traumatic brain injury, or TBI. For an entire year, you will devote everything to recovery. This will include things like occupational, speech, physical, and cognitive and psychotherapy, learning how to walk a straight line and cook a meal. You will find yourself trying to celebrate the tiniest degrees of progress and resist feeling like a failure if you have not yet returned to work. This journey will not be linear, and it will be especially difficult because no one can see your pain or how hard you are trying. You will want your old life back. Over time, you will take the hardest step of all. You will realize your old life is not coming back. 1 year after the fall, barely holding your emotions, you will sit on the news desk for one last time as anchor and say, "The door is open for another new chapter here at WGME, and I can assure you that if I can, I'll find my way back to you." Although this may not be the return that I had hoped for, I realize I still have the opportunity to do what I've always wanted to do: give people information and tell stories that can help keep them safe and healthy. And so if even one or two of you learn from my story of how a simple fall can dramatically change your life, I'll be so grateful. I have more to tell, and I'm still learning and trying to make progress, and I would like to help prevent falls like mine. So as I said 6 years ago, be careful out there. Take it a little slower than you need to. Your life can change in a single moment. I lost a career I deeply loved. And to end my letter, to that woman of 6 years ago, I would say, do not fear what you don't know. You will find strength you didn't know you have. You got this. And to all my fellow TBI warriors, I've still got your back too. And so here we are 6 years later. And as I said, it's not in exactly the same role, but I'm so appreciative that the station and MEMIC have asked me to partner with them on this project. Now, we haven't had a really tough winter yet so far, which, although I love the snow, is probably not a bad thing in terms of falls, but there has been some ice out there. Since that was my basic story and what happened to me, I'm going to start with that. I'm not alone here today. I have 3 guests with me. I'll introduce them to you right now. They are Dr. Jeffrey Barkin, who is a psychiatrist. And maybe we'll start with you, Jeffrey. Jeff is also past president of the Maine Medical Association and the State Psychiatric Association, and is co-host of his own podcast with Steve Woods, A Healthy Conversation. If we could just stay on the brain injury topic for a minute here, Jeff, tell us what happens during a brain injury.
Great question, Kim. It's great to be with you, and I encourage viewers to send questions in. It's a great opportunity to interact. Our brains, to put this in perspective, are not designed to accelerate or decelerate, go fast, and then all of a sudden stop. That's not the way that we were designed. Our brains live in our skull and they float in fluid. So what happens in a brain injury, imagine that somebody is hit from behind in a car or falls on ice, is a lot of energy is transferred immediately when the brain moves or stops moving in the case of a car accident. And that energy has to go someplace. It goes into the brain and it can cause shearing or rotation. So imagine that your head is hit, it rotates, and a lot of those long neuron fibers that connect the back of your brain to the front of your brain to the mid parts of the brain that coordinate balance, thinking, sequencing, vision, all of the things that get messed up in traumatic brain injury get messed up when somebody actually has that shearing. That's what it's called. Those long wires snap. Now, the good news is that in a brain injury, 95% of people do what you initially were told, they get better. But 5%, 1 in 20 don't. And it's those folks that develop symptoms. And it seems as if those people have brain structures that may predispose them to long-term negative outcomes.
And there are also other factors, as we know, Jeff, in terms of size, stature, the type of impact that you have, what happened after you fell. In my case, I was very dazed. I don't think I lost consciousness, but I was alone and I didn't really, wasn't aware of what had happened or my surroundings for a little bit. So for people who are concerned, if they fall and they may worry that they have a concussion, as you said, most of those resolve quickly. How do you know if you have a brain injury? Like, what are the symptoms of that?
So let's say you're in that category of 1 in 20 people who continues weeks and months after your head injury to have symptoms. It's important to know what those symptoms look like. And the most common symptom are headaches. One of the symptoms that you experienced that was terrible for you was that light and sound made your headaches worse. So bright lights, like being on a set, such as you are now, and hearing lights, that was very difficult. You had a lot of imbalance and balance issues. And the other thing that happens in brain injury is it gets hard to think. And if you think about your case, and you and I have had the chance to discuss it in the past in public venues, when you're a newscaster, you're having to multitask and you're having to walk and talk and read and listen all at the same time. It's those tasks that become difficult because those neurons that coordinate all of those tasks become sheared. And it's thought that when those neural networks don't regrow, people develop the symptoms of imbalance, the headaches with light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, cognitive changes where it's difficult to sequence, thinking slowly, balance problems, and also visual problems. And people will find that between vision and balance, their lives can be changed. Things like multitasking, being asked to take out the cat litter, then the garbage, become impossible. People can follow maybe a one-step command. So multitasking becomes really impaired. And finally, you have changes in mood. So you can have depression, anxiety, new onset irritability, where somebody who's a calm, kind person all of a sudden is prone to anger. I mean, imagine, and I think you would know more than any of us, how frustrating it is to not be able to focus and attend.
Yes, and I think it's almost like you're living inside my head, Jeff. But also, I think one of the keys to all of this, and one of the reasons we're here today, is because support is so important. All of the things you described are things a TBI patient is feeling, but you are not seeing. Your family perhaps can notice that you're responding and reacting more slowly. They may notice certainly the emotional issues and certainly vertigo and things like that. But much of this is internal. And as you're trying to fight to recover and worrying about returning to a job, support can be so important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in treatment with you, Dr. Barkan, in just a minute. But I want to get to some of our other guests. I also want to say thank you so much. I'm seeing some of your greetings, just hello. And, Felicia Knight, you're a treasure, Kim. Your strength is inspirational. I appreciate that. Somebody's getting 10 inches of snow in New Orleans, so this will save lives. Good luck with that. Stay inside if you can, is all I can say. Excellent topic. Somebody's watching from Leamington, and Wilburn Keller is watching. Thank you. And what adjustments might one have to make in life after a TBI? How do you deal with the symptoms? That's a great question. I'm going to put that down right here, and I promise you we will get to that question. And I just lost your name, but I will get to that question. I want to bring in Rose West, who is the safety management consultant for MEMIC. And Rose, one of the things you do is go out and help develop prevention ideas and concepts for many of the companies that you represent. And you know specifically how often these falls can impact someone's life. Can you tell us some of the statistics that you deal with at MEMIC?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So, falls are something that we see with all of the businesses that we work with. And across the nation, there are hundreds of thousands of fall incidents that occur, resulting in minor injuries, but also very moderate to severe injuries, such as traumatic brain injuries, hip fractures, and things of that nature. So it's something that whether you're at work, at home, regardless of what it is that you do, there is potential for these types of incidents. And that's why we're out here spreading this message.
And many people may think of you as a workers' comp company in terms of providing workers' comp, but what you would like to see is, fewer claims, not just for, the financial entity of that, but also because you see how much it does change people's life, which is why, your company has a whole dedicated branch to prevention.
Absolutely. So I'm in the loss control team, and my job is as a safety management consultant, meaning I work with businesses to try and assess their risk, look at the hazards that they have, and help them minimize that risk and those hazards. But the reason I do it is really to help people avoid these injuries because of the impact that they have to a person's life, as you're
Yes.
well aware and have experienced.
Yeah. And you did mention all sorts of other injuries that can really change people's lives and affect their ability to work, first and foremost. Although that shouldn't be first and foremost, it is a really important part of people's lives. And in my case, being a broadcast journalist was my identity for most all of my adult life. And so that was a very difficult transition, as I'm sure it is for many people. Let's go ahead and bring in Errol Keller. He is the small business segment leader at MEMIC. And Errol, you kind of work to implement some of what Rose was saying with the companies, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have to say that was my mother there, saying in New Orleans they got the 10 inches of snow. In Portland, Maine,
You
snow
told
is
me mom would
common.
be watching.
Oh yeah, I said my mom's gonna be on here, but in Portland, Maine, they you're used to snow, but down here in places like Atlanta, where I live, and in New Orleans, it's this topic is far-reaching. But yeah, I work for MEMIC. We provide workers' comp for businesses of all sizes. So we have three segments: loss sensitive, middle market, and small business. I'm the head of our small business department. But as Rose was mentioning, we're committed to workplace safety. And so one of the things that I enjoy about our organization is we do want to change the narrative around just being an insurance company that simply collects a premium. Our commitment is to put safety to work. That's our slogan. So our goal is to offer very physical, touchable strategies that have a definitive impact and improve safety in the work environments. And so we do see daily, unfortunately, how lives are changed, and how the bottom line for businesses are directly impacted by losses like slipping and tripping and falling. So if you don't mind, I want to share just a couple statistics here. Key numbers to remember are the number 8 and the number 5. So in 2022, there are more than 8.5 million people being treated in emergency rooms for fall-related injuries. In 2023, there were 885 workers who died from slip, trip, fall injuries. And so each year, Americans spend about here's another 5 number, about $50 billion in medical costs related to fall injuries. So slip, trip, and falls are recognized as the second leading cause of preventable deaths, the third leading cause of preventable injuries on the job. And all of this is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the National Safety Council. So there is a great body of research evaluating this because so many lives are impacted. And as you mentioned earlier, Kim, it's not just about it's not just about the work, but it's really about the lives being impacted here. Our goal at MEMIC is to keep workers working so we can have livelihood for ourselves, for our families. And our goal is to help keep the small businesses that are the backbone of our community and our economy, keep those viable.
And the
Yeah, wow.
statistics are incredibly remarkable,
Mhm,
as you said, just really far reaching. And I know,
mhm.
having grown up in DC, when you get half an inch of snow, the whole city shuts down and doesn't really know what to do. So, you talk about most of these falls are preventive, and
Mm,
I would agree to a certain extent. I don't want to place too much
mhm.
blame on victims, but I will
Right.
say that in my case, the real main reason this happened is because I was in a hurry, and
Mm,
I also was in a situation where we had a warm up, as I explained, and then ice had frozen underneath of freshly fallen very light snow that I
mhm.
couldn't see the ice. But had I been going more
Mhm.
slowly, and kind of been more aware of the situation, I might have been able, to prevent a bit better.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, let's talk about what people can do and be aware of, and then we'll get to treatments for brain injuries. But what are some
Yeah.
of the things, Rose, that you recommend? And then Errol, I'll let you come back too,
Mhm.
for
Mm.
businesses and just for individuals to kind of be safer out there. One of mine is just, be very conscious of your movements.
Mm.
It sounds simple, but
Mhm.
you know, be careful as you're walking. Are you still there, Errol?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
No, absolutely. And to your point, that you mentioned earlier about preventable, they slip, trips, and falls are fortuitous, by nature. So definitely no judgment. We just encourage safety practices that we believe can help reduce or prevent the type of injury from occurring. So I do want to give a call out to mimic.com/walk safe where you can find more information here. But three things that I think are solid resources to share. We have many resources at Mimic, but the three things that are memorable: signs, shoes, and safety experts. I always have to kind of have something to remember to help me remember the resource. But signs. So one of the resources that we encourage businesses to have is signs placed in areas of high traffic. So areas that are prone to hazards from tripping or slickness due to weather and ice or rain. And there is a great resource for this, one that we do share with our customers. If you go to myparkingsign.com, they have ice alert signs. And these are signs that change colors from silver to blue as the temperature, if it approaches freezing or gets close to freezing. And so the goal is just to help employees be aware, as you mentioned, of their potential freezing conditions. Another resource, shoes. We partner with an organization called Shoes for Crews. They've been in the business of designing slip-resistant shoes since I was born in 1984, so about 40 years. They develop footwear solutions for businesses, and they'll also help manage those solutions. And so their goal, again, is to make sure your staff is receiving the right shoe based on industry, based on environment and work. And so we have a partnership with them. MEMIC policyholders, they can get a 15% discount on all shoe types and shipping discounts on some of their ice cleat products. And then lastly is safety experts. So as it relates to safety, the question is, what do you do when you don't know what to do? And if you're like me, you lean on the experts. So we have a resource that's simply called Ask a Safety Expert. So if you go to mimic.com, you can click on it. You can ask a question that's unique to your business, a concern that you might have about your workplace safety. This is free to our policyholders. And you can send your question and one of the consultants will respond back to you. And if there needs to be more of a back and forth, you can have that too. They can have a conversation with you about that. But those are three top of mind resources for small businesses.
And back to you, Rose, did we discuss yet, forgive me if we have, the fact that it doesn't have to be 32 degrees to get icy out there? Most people think I'm safe, if the temperature is above freezing, but that's not always the case either.
That's right, Kim. 37 degrees is when we have to watch out for ice formation. And the main reason for that is when we take a temperature reading, it's usually a few feet above the ground, but the ground itself can be a few degrees colder. So it can actually be freezing above ground at the ground level, but warmer than that outside. We're not too worried about that right now in Maine, but it's gonna come back to us.
Some people will say that they notice the temperature gauge on their car start flashing at 37 degrees. And, that's often likely why. That's signaling that the roads could be slippery out there. So something else to think about. All right, back to you, Dr. Barkan. People are asking about treatments, and I can talk a little bit about my therapy. It involved speech therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, occupational therapy, vestibular therapy, neuropsychiatry, just a whole array of things to work on balance and memory and reading skills, which I still really struggle with. And at the end of this, I'll tell you all, I see a lot of you saying it's wonderful to see how well you're doing. And I really do appreciate it. And I will tell you how my life has changed and some of the things that I've had to sacrifice in order to navigate the healthiest life with a TBI. But I'll let you weigh in here, Dr. Barkan, on some treatments out there.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. The most important thing that I saw was a message from Elizabeth Peavy, who pointed out what a heavy lift you're doing today. The first treatment is understanding that somebody who's had a TBI is really struggling and it's really hard for them. So the more that one's family and friends and coworkers can appreciate that, you're more attuned to the kind of demoralization that somebody who's had a traumatic brain injury feels. So if you've been a successful newscaster and you find that you can't do those basic things that you've been able to do, you feel demoralized. And it's important for us to understand that dynamic. So we don't make you feel bad when we say, oh, it's great to see you doing so well, because That can make you feel bad. That's a psychologic concept. The treatments. Really, really glad you asked. I calculated, Kim, that when you fell, it was the equivalent of being hit by a 95 mile per hour hardball, a fastball. So that's a lot of impact on a brain. So what ends up happening are the symptoms that we discussed before, and the treatments are symptomatic, geared toward reducing headache, geared towards reducing light sensitivity using glasses that block out light, correcting vision with the use of prisms, the use of physical therapy to help with balance, the use of psychotherapy and sometimes medication therapy to help with mood changes or irritability, speech therapy and cognitive therapy to help pull together the way we think and communicate. And many people, when they're afforded an opportunity to have all of those different treatments, slowly recover. Not everybody, but many do. And I know that with you, you've done more and more. You and I have gotten to do these things, and it's nice to see that. But I really want to reinforce the message that you don't want to have somebody with TBI take on so much and then feel demoralized that they can't do more. And that's something that all of us can do. We don't have to be speech therapists or psychiatrists. And finally, the best way to treat a traumatic brain injury is to prevent it. And I'm a geriatric neuropsychiatrist, and one of the beautiful things about COVID is the use of telepsychiatry. And I love having my patients take me on a tour of their home. I could look at their shoes, their thresholds, their carpets, and it's amazing how a modification in a shoe or a threshold, a doorway threshold, can really reduce the risk of falls. And finally, in terms of prevention, what I've been using in my household is pet-friendly de-icer. It's not salt. It's more of an abrasive material, okay, that doesn't ruin your floors. It's not salt, so it doesn't hurt your pets, but it creates a level of abrasion which during black ice can be helpful. And a final tip is the use of heating mats, particularly around cars or other structures that those of us that go outside when there may be black ice, you may want to entertain having heating mats, because I know for myself, that's been real helpful at preventing falls.
I love that idea. That sounds great. Thank you so much for touching on all of that. And also, Elizabeth Peavy, so kind to write that in. I think, that it's almost more of a challenge in some ways the further away you get from your initial injury, because for the first year or two, for me, it was just solid recovery. And then I had to accept, this is my life now. So what can I do? And, keep moving forward. And it's a constant repositioning of what makes me feel the healthiest and how do I function the best. And I don't think I will ever have the opportunity to go back to a life where I don't have to consciously think about that. I do navigate my life so that if I have an event, certainly this is one of the largest events I've done in the past 6 years. And if any of you, just to test your brains, have noticed my background has changed twice here, then you'll know that I've also been running back and forth just to deal with some technical issues here. Oh, how I miss TV. But just because of this kind of a lift, it will take me days to recover. Now, it used to take weeks. So I look at this as progress. Another thing you said that really hit me when I was, seeing my TBI doctor every week, the first question I would ask her when I went in was, can I go back to work yet? And they can't tell you. Dr. Barkin, as much as you'd like to say to somebody with a concussion, you'll be better in 6 weeks, everybody knows now, or I know at least, if you've seen one concussion, you've seen one concussion. And so she wasn't able to answer that question. And I was getting that question from a lot of people. And it did make me feel the shame that you mentioned, that I wasn't somehow able to be the warrior that I wanted to be, to get back to 100% normal. And I was missing, as she said to me one day when I came in, we're not going to talk about work until the end. Because if you set this as your only goal, then you're missing every slight achievement or amount of progress that you're making. And you need to take the time to celebrate each of those. And so that's what I do here today, is celebrate with all of you that we've been able to have this conversation, hopefully provide you with some information, some resources as well. I would invite you to keep watching the MEMIC site, memic.com/walksafe, and WGMA.com will have a transcript of this program for those of you who want to mull it over or look back on something you may have heard here today. We'll continue to do some other pieces that you'll see on the air on Channel 13 WGME through February at least. And I'll leave you with one last thought. You know, I spent most of my career, and even before that, working in community service and public service and helping many organizations out there. I, in fact, have had open heart surgery, and, you know, I feel very strongly about women in heart disease. And there are, you know, many other causes that I gave my heart to, and I know they're also important. And when I decided to focus on this, I thought, well, people are going to think there are things that are so much more critical, you know, life-threatening out there. And yes, and my heart goes out to anyone struggling with any sort of illness or disability. And I hope you have the resources and the support that you need. But this is for us. This is for traumatic brain injury survivors, who I believe are true warriors, because they are not giving up. They are choosing to live with a new focus and with often a lot of pain. And yet here we are preserving, and in my case, trying to raise awareness still as a journalist. So I thank you so much for joining us for this live question and answer webinar on WGME. And I would remind you, everyone, to please walk safe this winter.
Walk Safe This Winter with Kim Block has been sponsored by MEMIC.